fantastic. So we are doing a message today, and here's my title. You ready for it? How could I be so stupid? So I know it's kind of a strange title, and some of you maybe you're offended by it. Some of you are kind of just interested. Some of you are just thinking, man, I'm really glad I brought my husband today, because I've been meaning to communicate this to him somehow. We're looking at the life of a guy that is so famous in the Bible that if I show a picture of something that looks sort of like him, we don't even know what he looks like, but I show you a picture, you'll know who I'm talking about from the Old Testament. See if we get anybody guess and yell it out. You ready? Okay, go ahead. Samson, that's right. Somebody went to Sunday school growing up. It's Samson. That's either Samson or The Rock, right? Okay, next picture. They actually just did a Samson movie, which I hear was pretty terrible, but that's Samson. Now, listen, Samson lived in a time when judges ruled Israel. Now, let me help you understand. Way back in the day, the Israelites got into the promised land. Yay! And they were following God for a time. And then pretty soon they ran away from him. Well, in this time period, there was no king of Israel. So they would just have these judges. And every once in a while, God would send a judge to save this people of Israel. And then they'd run away from him again. And he would bring another judge to save his people from Israel. And the reason why people got so messed up is because this is how they lived. There's one line that is used to determine how they lived. And that was this: everybody did what was right in their own eye. Nobody set the rules. They didn't have a king to give them any laws. They weren't following God. You just kind of did what you want, when you want, with who you want, whenever you want. Now, does that sound familiar to any of you living in America these days? It's kind of the way we are, right? So God would, in these times, he would send judges to help save Israel. And Samson is probably one of the most famous, if not the most famous judge during those times. Now, I want to take you back to a little bit of Samson and who he was and what made him so special. So if you have a Bible, why don't you open it up to Judges 13. Right? Judges 13, the words are going to be behind me as well. Samson was miraculously chosen by God, and we see that. Check this out. Judges 13. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord again. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines, and a certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of the Danites had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. Now, that's just a line in the Bible, right? But we all know, we've all had friends who've walked down that path. That can be a difficult sentence to read into your life. But that's what these people were dealing with. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to them and said, "You are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine," which is usually a good idea if you're pregnant, "no other fermented drink, that you don't eat anything unclean. You'll become pregnant and have a son whose head is to never be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." Now, I don't know how much you know about the Bible, but basically Samson's miraculous birth is like every other miraculous birth in the Bible, okay? An angel comes down, and he says, "You're going to have a baby," to somebody that they shouldn't be having a kid, right? Sometimes it's old people, and sometimes it's people that haven't had sex yet, and sometimes it's people that just can't have kids. And yet here comes this angel: "You're going to have a kid." Because Manoah and his wife had been to a lot of baby showers, man. They had chipped in on a lot of strollers, and it was never them. And God said, "Now, look, this is it. You're going to have, it's you." Now, let me tell you something about this baby. We want this baby to be a Nazirite, and I don't know if you know what a Nazirite is. You could take, if you were in Israel, you could take a Nazirite vow. And usually people who took a Nazirite vow were adults, and they would do it for like a month. And during that month, you could, one, don't touch anything dead. All right, so I'm not sure what you do if you have leather seats in your car. So that's maybe a gray area. Secondly, no wine or no grape juice, just to be safe. And third, you can't cut your hair. And like I said, usually for a month, somebody would do that. Well, these people were told Samson is going to be a Nazirite his whole life. He's not going to get a haircut his whole life. I mean, he's like Fabio times 10. His hair is just going to be so long, and all these kind of restrictions on his life kind of reminds me of some of you parents who have vowed that you will never let your kid eat at McDonald's. Do you know these people I'm talking about? And I'm totally, I get that, except have you had the fries? I mean, I'm with you on the nuggets, but if you had the fries are amazing. So this is him. This is his life. You know, I don't know how many times I've spoken on this particular passage, and I've never noticed this one verse. It's the greatest parenting verse, one of the greatest parenting verses in the Bible, and I want to read it to you. Because Manoah's wife said, hey, I'm going to have a baby, and Manoah is kind of freaking out, like, I don't know what to do, and he makes this prayer, Judges 13, verse 8. Manoah prayed to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I beg you to let the man of God you sent to us come again to teach us how to bring up the boy who is to be born. Basically, he's saying, God, I don't know what I'm doing. Whoever that is that you sent the first time, send him back, because, man, you got to teach me how to raise this kid. And I'm just telling you, those verses never lose their power in your life. Those verses are, if you have a kid, learn those verses, memorize those verses. By the time they're in junior high, know those verses, because, you know, we need help. I remember when we had our first kid, I knew nothing, and so the first time we went to bathe my son, this is what it looked like, all right? I'm bathing him in the sink, and my wife is standing next to me holding what book? Anybody know? What to expect when you're expecting. Reading how to bathe somebody to me. And we're fighting through this whole thing. We can't agree on how to bathe our kid. And what made it, here's another fun fact, is that right behind me, my mother-in-law was videotaping the whole thing. Listen, man, when you have a kid, you don't know what you're doing, and then they become school age, and you have to drop them off to kindergarten. You don't know how to deal with that. And then they hit junior high, and they have all kinds of other issues. And they hit high school, they have all kinds of different pressures. And let me just tell you something. You never outgrow these verses, because I have adult kids, and you just have to keep praying them. I was hanging out with a buddy of mine. He's about 10 years older than me, and his daughter, who had been married, was going through a divorce. And I always remember what my buddy Denny said. He looked me in the eyes and he said, look, man, parenting never goes away. The stakes just get higher. So I love this prayer. So Manoah prays this, teach us how to bring up this kid. I have no idea what I'm doing. Well, not only did Samson have great parents, not only did he have God's blessing, but God totally was going to pour into this kid's life. Look with me at the end of Judges 13, verse 24 through 25. It says, the woman gave birth to a boy, and they named him Samson, and he grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him. Samson is known as God's appointed leader of these days. What Samson is really known for is Samson, when the Spirit of God would come on him, he would get this amazing strength. And we're going to see some of the ways that God gave him this amazing strength. But he had a flaw. And we see it over and over and over in his life. And Samson just could not make the right decision regarding sex and his sexuality. And over and over and over, it ruled his life, and it ultimately ruined him. And we'll look at his life, and we'll look at some of the things he does and go, how could you be so stupid? How could somebody actually make that decision? And yet, if we are honest with ourselves, looking back in our lives, some of the decisions that we made, that we look on in our lives that we regret the most, all have to do with this one area. How could I have done that? How could I have met him? How could I have believed her? How could I be so stupid? So here's how I want to start. Why don't you just bow your head? Look, you're here with me for the next half hour or so, God brought you in this room. Maybe somebody dragged you in here today. But what if God were to speak to you in this moment? So I want you to just come before God and say, God, will you speak to me? Will you open up my heart? Maybe even one of the things you might want to do is just say this, God, I'm going to be honest with you today. This is an area of issue for me, and so I pray that you would speak to me, and I'll be honest with you. So just take about 30 seconds and say, God, would you be in these moments with me? Lord God, I pray that you would meet us here. I pray that you would speak to us in ways that I cannot teach. And I pray, God, that we would go out of here closer to you. I pray that some people would go out of here forgiven and feeling freer than they ever have. In your name we pray. Amen. So if we are honest with ourselves, a lot of stupid decisions that we've made have been around, relationships. And I'm not just talking about big, huge ones, because I know that those are out there. But just some, when you think back of when your dating years and, high school and college, how many dumb things did we do, right? Just for fun, I looked up some hashtags. Any of you guys fans of The Tonight Show? I love Jimmy Fallon, and they do these great hashtags. And these are all dating-related hashtags. Some of these are hashtag worst first date, and I thought I'd show them to you. You ready? Let me give you a couple of these. All right, this is hashtag worst first date. Before picking me up, he asked if I like Busch Light and how many I thought I could fit in my purse. That's not a great first date, is it? Okay, next, Jay Hart says, homeboy wouldn't stop putting the chopsticks in his mouth pretending to be a walrus. That's so funny. Feels like something I might have done, though, doesn't it? All right, next. I once had a date tell me I looked sturdy. That's so funny. Okay, next one. Halfway through the date, he looks at me and goes, are you having a good time? Because your face, it looks like you aren't. Yeah, go with that, buddy. Next, after paying the bill, my friend turned to his date and told her, you ate more than I predicted. I broke up with my boyfriend, but he was so drunk that he forgot and he showed up to hang out the next day. I had to break up with him again. It's really good. Okay, next one. At the end of the date, I asked if she wanted to go out again. She said she's going to take a break from dating for a while. Yeah, that didn't go as you thought. I took a girl to a baseball game. I got hit by a foul ball, and everybody saw me crying on the Jumbotron. I think that's it. Man, how many different mistakes have we made? I know it's prom season, right? My prom was the worst. It cost me so much money. I went out with a girl who didn't want to go out with me, and I begged her, and she went anyway. And she told me somehow that her parents made her be home at 12. Looking back, how many stupid things have we done? And it's not just people we dated or money we spent or places we've been. But how many of you look back and go, man, I can't believe I went out with him. I can't believe I tried to make it work with her. I can't believe I said yes. I can't believe I let him talk me into this. And you live with those regrets. And you think to yourself, how could I be so stupid? There's something about relationships that brings that out in us. And it was only a business trip. And it was only clicking on a computer. And it was a guy that you never should have trusted, but you thought you were going to change him. And somehow it just turned out to be one of the dumbest things you ever did. You know what? Samson's life was filled with all kinds of promise. God's Spirit would come on him. He would defend the people of Israel. I mean, he really is one of the manliest people in the Bible. In fact, I want to read you some of what I think the manliest verses in all of the Bible. Judges 15 says this: as he approached Lehi, the Philistines came toward him, shouting. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it, and he struck down 1,000 men. Okay, how cool is that, guys? 1,000 men. That hill was called Ramath Lehi from that point on. Ramath Lehi means jawbone hill. I mean, it sounds like a Clint Eastwood movie, doesn't it? I would love to have seen that. God was alive in this guy, but he always made the same mistake. Look with me at Judges 14, verse 1. We're just kind of getting to know Samson. This happened. Samson went down to Timnah, saw a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. I'm not sure how that works in your family. His father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all of our people? It sounds like a good Jewish family, right? Isn't there a nice Jewish woman that we can hook you up with? Must you go to this uncircumcised Philistine to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, get her for me. She's the right one for me. Back then, parents were responsible for arranging marriages. They had to make all of he's putting his family in a very difficult position. And I love this line, she is the right one for me. If you take the phrase, everybody did what was right in their own eyes, that is exactly what Samson is doing in this moment. She's right. She looks good to me. Get her for me. And I don't care what God says, because God said don't marry those people. And it wasn't because he was anti-interracial marriage, because he knew the influence these people would have. God said don't do it. His parents said don't do it. He says, man, I don't care what people say. I'm going to do what I want, when I want, with who I want, and then nobody's going to stop me. And it ended up costing him big time. Look at verse 5. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. They're going to go make these arrangements. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring toward him, and the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. A couple years ago, we had a guy come speak at Canyon Springs. A friend of mine says, you got to have him speak. This guy's awesome. Well, he was part of the power team. You guys ever seen a power team before? These big guys that do all these feats of strength. And he ripped a phone book, and he took a pan that you'd have in your kitchen, and he bent it to look like a taco. It was amazing. And I was thinking that maybe that's what Canyon Springs needs. Maybe I need to do feats of strength. But when you looked at that guy, you could kind of see how he would do those feats. You can see why I couldn't do those, but you can see why, because this guy was shredded. And we think that that's what Samson must have looked like if he's doing all of these things. I have another idea of what I think Samson must have looked like. Okay, here, that's what I think he looked like. Right there. Listen, if a guy who's big and shredded does amazing feats of strength, you get it. But if Sheldon does it, you know it has to be the power of God alive in his life. Well, let me tell you how this relationship turned out. He's coming back through that same area on another one of these trips to plan his engagement and his wedding, and he notices the lion that he ripped apart. And inside of that lion, there is bees coming in and out and honeycomb. And so he reaches inside of this dead animal carcass, what he's told not to do, and he finds the honeycomb. He pulls it out, and he starts to eat it. Now, my first thought is, how desperate do you have to be to reach inside a dead animal carcass to eat this? It's the same kind of desperation that leads us at any time in our life to order tacos from Jack in the Box, right? You know what I'm talking about? What's even in those? I don't even know what's in those. And so he eats it. As he goes into this big party, it's like an engagement party, he decides that he's going to make a wager with some of the guys that are there. He says, look, if you guys could figure out this riddle, I will give you 30 pieces of clothing, full pieces, full outfits, if you can figure it out. And here's the riddle. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. All based on him pulling honey out of this lion. Well, for the first 4 days, they can't figure it out. And so these guys decide to turn up the heat on his woman he's going to marry. Judges 14:50, and it says this, on the fourth day, they came to Samson's wife, coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal our property? Look, this is why God doesn't want them hanging out with the Philistines. This is a simple bet. These guys, it will cost them an article of clothing, and yet they don't want to lose that clothing so bad that they threaten to burn her and her family to death. And so at this point, she starts nagging Samson, saying, hey, tell me what's going on. He finally says, okay, I will tell you the riddle. She tells it to these men. Samson gets angry. He goes and finds 30 Philistines. He kills 30 of them. He takes their clothes, gives them to the guys to pay off the debt. And then he leaves. By the time he comes back to see his wife has been given away to another man. And just so you know, later on in the story, the Philistines burn her and her family to death anyway. You know what? Samson just made stupid decision after stupid decision, and it was all around his sex life. Now, the worst decision comes in chapter 16. There's actually two of them. Look with me at Judges 16, verse 1. One day, Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute. He went to spend the night with her. The people of Gaza were told, Samson's here. So they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. They made no move during the night, saying, at dawn, we'll kill him. They're surrounding him. In the morning, when he wakes up to go home, we're going to get him. Well, somehow Samson figures this out. So in verse 3, Samson lay there until the middle of the night. When he got up, he took hold of the doors of the city gate. Together with the two posts, he tore them loose, bar and all. He lifted them on his shoulders. He carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. It's estimated that those doors weighed 700 pounds. He ripped them off. That's how he made his way to freedom. Almost cost him his life. Now, here's the big story, though. Next relationship starts in verse 4. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was, help me? That's right. Never go out with a Delilah. I have a friend who named his dog Delilah. That works. That's okay. But not your daughter. The rulers of the, well, if you did, it's okay. We still will like her. It sounded very judgy right then, didn't I? The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength, and how we can overpower him so that we may tie him up and subdue him. And each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. It's about $90,000. So Delilah said this to Samson. Okay, listen to this. You may consider this a red flag in dating, right? Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued. Right? If you're reading that in an eHarmony profile, just keep going. Go, why would you ever answer that question? And why would anybody ever ask you that question? And the stupidity of Samson just starts coming out. In verse 7, he answered her, I don't know why he did, but he did. If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man. Then the rulers of the Philistines, they brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried. She tied him with them. With men hidden in the room, she called him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Now, at this point, what do you do in your relationship? I'm thinking maybe break up. Samson goes through this exact scenario 4 different times. The next time she begs him, he tells her, it's fresh rope. You tie me with fresh rope, no problem. Same thing happens. He breaks it, he beats up everybody in the room. Next time he says, if you put my hair in a loom, you just weave it in there, then I will lose all my strength. People come in, he beats everybody up and sends them out. Finally, verse 15, she said to him, how can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? Really? This is the 3rd time you've made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength. With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. So he told her everything. No razor has ever been used on my head because I've been a Nazirite, dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaven, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. How can you be so stupid? You know, when we read it in the Bible, it just seems so obvious to us. But let's just be real for a second. How many times have we gotten involved with somebody we shouldn't get involved with? And how many times do we make decisions we just shouldn't make? And over time, the passion starts calling the shots. And if you look back in your history, some of the stupidest things that you've done are because you did the wrong thing. You believed the wrong person. You let your passion run your boat. And it always ends up ugly. Verse 18, when Delilah saw that he told her everything, she sent back word to the rulers of the Philistines, come back once more. He told me everything. So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. After putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair and began to subdue him. And his strength left him. Then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He woke from his sleep. I'll go out before and shake myself free. But he didn't know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, and they gouged out his eyes, which was probably the problem in the first place. We just look at him and we go, how could you be so dumb? But that's just the way it works, folks. You know, and it can happen in any manner of ways in your life. You can think, man, work is so important to me, and so I'm going to pour all of my time into my work, and pretty soon work's calling the shots. And you do things that maybe you wouldn't have done before because you want so much to succeed and to make that money. Or maybe you're at a party and, you know, just started off with a couple of beers, or you just say to yourself, man, I use beer to relax. But over time, beer is calling the shots. And some of the dumbest things you ever did were because you're not in control anymore. And that's what it looks like with people sexually. They start saying yes when they should have said no. They start putting themselves in positions they should never be in. It's only a business trip. It was only a bachelor party. It's only a couple clicks on a computer. Nobody's getting hurt. And over time, it leads you to this place where you do the stupidest thing you ever did and the thing that you regret the most. Now, to this point, it feels very much like a male-oriented message. But ladies, you just have to be honest with yourselves too. Because it's probably not a visual thing with you, but maybe you're just a little naive. And maybe you believed him when he said, I really love you. If you just do this, if you just follow me here, if you just get involved with me there, and yet you believed and you thought you could change him and you thought that good would happen and you believed the line. And over time, you ended up doing something that you wish you had never done. And those regrets are very real in your life right now. Now, I don't want to leave you like this because it's sort of depressing right now, right? So let's not close in prayer. There's actually an end to this story, and I want to read it to you. You know, over time, they gouge out his eyes, they throw him in jail. In other words, time his hair starts to grow back. In verse 28, Samson prayed to the Lord. They bring him to a party, all right? There's a big party. All the Philistines want to make fun of Samson, and so they bring him to this. It's huge. It's actually multiple thousands of people in this building. Samson prayed to the Lord, Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just one more, and let me get one more blow. Get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, and bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one, his left hand on the other, and Samson said, let me die with the Philistines, and he pushed with all of his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more than when he had died than while he lived. God, one more time, just give me strength one more time. You know, let me tell you something. It's really the whole message of the book of Judges. You can run away and you can drink all you want and you can do what you want. You can hurt whoever you want and waste your family. You can do all of those things. But every time you come back, when you realize how stupid you were and you come back, God is there to accept you back and to hold open his arms and to love you like you never left in the first place. That's the whole message of the book of Judges. It's really the whole message of the Bible, is that that's how much God loves you. And I don't know what you did, and I don't know with who you did it, and I don't know how you regret it, but I do want you to understand that there is forgiveness. The moment you come back, forgiveness, always. Let me point out one last little part. At the end, it says that more died. He killed many more with his death than when he lived. All right, greater impact with his death than when he lived. Does that sound like anybody? Listen, Jesus came down to earth and he healed people and he spoke to people. But man, when he died, all the world heard about him. Literally, billions of people in the world today follow this one man. And Samson points us to him. And the reason why Samson points us to him is because he can tell us, look, man, no matter what you've done, no matter who you've done, no matter who you did it with, I will forgive you. I have paid the price for you. That's what Jesus did. So here's how I want to end. Why don't you bow your head? I want to give you an opportunity to chat with God. And just say this. Maybe be honest with him. Say, God, look, I have made some of these decisions. Maybe sexual area isn't your deal, but if it is, be honest with him. Or maybe it's work, or maybe it's alcohol or drugs, whatever. I don't know what it is. Use this moment to say, God, would you forgive me? This is what I've done. This is the stupidest thing I've ever done. I wish I hadn't done it. Just be honest. If you say, God, forgive me, he will come into your life and he'll forgive you. And you can walk out of this building today clean and free in the eyes of God. Now, some of you might have walked in and maybe you don't even have this relationship with God. If that's you, then just pray this. Say, God, I have made a mess of my life and I am going to give my life to you today and I'm going to let you call the shots now. I'm going to give my life to you. Just pray, dear God, forgive me of my sin. Forgive me of the things I wish I hadn't done. I give my life to you. I want you to lead me from now on. Lord God, I thank you that we don't have to be perfect to be loved by you. And if we just come before you, you will lift us up, make us new. In your name we pray. Amen.